go straight over to my first guest, Chairman of Brexit Watch, former MEP Ben Habib. Good morning, Ben.
Good morning, Kevin.
Well, we're watching this prolonged saga of the two wannabe prime ministers battling out to be the next resident of number 10. We've got to wait another 3 weeks almost, I think it is. September the 5th, we finally find out who's in charge. We don't know right now because the answer is no one's in charge. But among her many, many promises from Liz Truss, she's come up with her plan to get tough on the migrant crisis, get tough with the French, but it doesn't really address the central problem, and that is that as long as we're in the European Court of Human Rights, we won't be able to send a message to the migrants that if you come over here, we're going to put you on a plane and send you to Rwanda, because those planes will never get off the ground. So all this tough talking, don't forget, prior to her tough plan, we had Rishi's 10-point plan to solve the migrant crisis, which won't solve it. It's just more political verbiage that won't amount to a hill of beans, isn't it?
Well, I mean, I completely agree that the Rwandan plan is not the solution to a failed border policy. The reality is that the Rwandan plan is a deportation policy rather than a policy designed to protect our borders. You can only deport people once they've successfully made it to the UK. What we have to do is find a way to prevent them from getting to the UK in the first place. And that is a physical job which starts at our territorial waters where they meet those of France. And that's where government has singularly failed to do its job. It's not really a matter about the Rwandan plan. The Rwandan plan only kicks in when you failed at the border. So we need to be much more robust at our border. And that either comes from Border Force and the Royal Navy taking a robust stand with boats as they try and cross into our waters, turning them back. I think Richard Tice's idea was to tow them all the way back to France, which should be like a red rag to a bull. I'd love to see British naval ships. I'd love to see British naval ships turning up in French ports uninvited, dropping back these would-be migrants. But whatever it is, it's a physical job that needs to take place, which Border Force and the Royal Navy so far have failed to do. That's what government needs to get a grip of. Actually, the Rwandan plan is a distraction by government. It suits government, I think, Kevin, to be able to blame the European Court of Human Rights because it takes blame away from themselves. We've seen so much of this in the past. When government fails, it used to blame the EU. Then when we left the EU, and I put that in inverted commas for reasons we can discuss later, they blame the civil service. They blame the Navy for not doing its job. They blame the European Court of Human Rights. The reality is responsibility lies with our government. It has a significant majority in Parliament. It can pass any laws it needs to pass to ensure that Border Force and the Royal Navy do their job. And that's what needs to take place.
I mean, how about this? As Richard Tice says, and I know that you would endorse his feelings, and I agree with him, he says that in a humane way, when these dinghies, sometimes with 50 or 60 people, sometimes more, on board, embark on their dangerous voyages across the English Channel, when they get to the halfway point, we meet them. We look after them, but we turn them round and we take them back to the beaches. Now, Liz Truss is saying, I need to sit down with the French and sort all this out.
Yeah, it doesn't work.
Let's just do it, because when a plan to deal with the migrants is predicated on negotiating and getting cooperation from the French, it's dead in the water right away, because we will never, ever get cooperation from the French. All they want to do is to see the back of these migrants and wave them goodbye. So saying, we're going to get round the table with the French, it's pointless, isn't it?
It is utterly pointless. And again, this is a bit like finding others to blame. So often we see our government seeking bilateral or multilateral solutions to problems which they could resolve unilaterally, which would be best resolved unilaterally. We're the 5th largest economy in the world. We're the 10th largest armed force in the world. We have the ability to make decisions and implement them without the need to rely on any other country or any other foreign entity coming to our rescue or having to come to the table in order for us to be able to do what's right by the British people. And we see this, again, I'm going to digress slightly, but we see it with the Northern Ireland Protocol. You know, it's all about wishing to reach an agreement with the EU. Well, that's dead in the water. We know we're not going to reach an agreement with the EU. The British government has to take determined unilateral action. We need to do that with Northern Ireland, and we need to do it with border control at the point of our territorial waters meeting those of the French. It's as simple as that. And until government actually understands that it's been elected by the British people for the interests of the British people, and it's expected to use its powers to fulfill those obligations, it won't be able to govern effectively. And this seems to be lost on our government. We've got to stop talking to the French, and we've got to take action.
Exactly right. And just before we go to break, Ben, let's get back to the Rwanda scheme and the European Court of Human Rights. We remember that the last plane, or the first plane that was supposed to go to East Africa, by the time it was ready to take off, it had one migrant on board, which beggars belief. But, of course, that was grounded with a quick phone call to a taxi-rank judge in Strasbourg who overruled weeks of wrangling in the British courts. We'd allowed it to go, but no, it didn't happen. So Liz Truss is now talking about our Bill of Rights. We've got to use our Bill of Rights. Well, is she actually saying that if the if the European Court of Human Rights says that plane can't take off, that we will say, balls to that, our Bill of Rights says it can? Is she saying that? Because if she's saying that, we're getting somewhere, but I somehow doubt it.
I think that's what she's trying to say, that we're going to narrow the definitions required in order to be able to exercise our own laws in our own land. And take it away from the European Court of Human Rights. But she's on a very sticky wicket. First of all, let's just go back to your opening comment, Kevin. There's only one passenger on that plane. The problem here isn't the European Court of Human Rights. The plane, if it had been full, which I think there's a capacity of around 400, and the ECHR stepped in.
401. There are 399 spare seats on that plane.
I know. Well, talk about privileged service that one. He was probably regretting the flight being cancelled. But it's not really a European Court of Human Rights problem. But even if she manages to achieve that, what her and Rishi Sunak are dishonest about, frankly, is that we're not in a position to deviate from the European Convention of Human Rights. It's hardwired into the trade and cooperation agreement we've signed with the European Union. It's also hardwired into the Good Friday Belfast Agreement. And we will have all sorts of international trouble if we try to deviate away from it. But as I say, it's not necessary to deviate away from the ECHR. ECHR isn't the problem. We need government to take control of our borders. That's what they said in their 2019 manifesto. That's what they need to do. We don't need elaborate deportation schemes. We need simple, physical, robust border control.
Stop them getting here, then we don't have to worry about Rwanda. Ben, let's move on and let's talk about the battle to be Britain's next Prime Minister. I seem to remember the two people involved just about, Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss. I can't get away from them right now in this ludicrously prolonged battle. Let's just focus on that for a second. The Tory party is letting this nation down by allowing this foregone conclusion contest to drag on so long. We are in a rudderless interregnum. We have a Prime Minister who couldn't care less, just got back from his honeymoon, is not paying any attention at all. We have a Chancellor of the Exchequer who is actually on holiday, and we have the Foreign Secretary who is involved in other things, in other words, fighting with Rishi. That contest, it seems to me, is already over. Why 3 more weeks of it? This is letting the nation down in its hour of need, isn't it?
I go much further than that, Kevin. I would say that this Conservative government has fundamentally let the nation down ever since it was elected, and indeed previous Tory governments before it have done the same. If you look at the manifesto pledges made by Boris Johnson when he was elected, There are very, very few of them on which he's delivered. I'm hesitant to say he hasn't delivered any. But on the big issues, this government has utterly failed. What we've had with Boris Johnson for the last 3 years is a prime minister who has forgotten that he's won the election, forgotten that it's time to stop campaigning and to start leading. And, you know, what we see with government, and we've seen it actually, funny enough, in these debates as well, is a perpetual desire to please everyone by promising whatever they need to promise in order to get the requisite votes. Tory governments have become phenomenal campaigning machines, but they do not govern. And what I'm really hoping that at the end of this, as you say, protracted process, is Liz Truss wins and that she delivers on the promises she's made, which includes a general declaration on delivering the 2019 manifesto pledges, which if she does do that, then the wait would have been worth it. What we can't have is more big state, high taxation, a nanny state. It's actually a wet nurse, I think, nowadays. It's no longer a nanny state. It's a complete wet nurse. We've got to break away from that. We've got to get back to true conservative principles. People have to be empowered to make decisions themselves for themselves, not just with their own money, but with the way they lead their lives. These are all things Liz Truss seems to be promising. If she's elected and she can quickly deliver those, then some of the damage done by Johnson's government over the last 3 years and prior Tory administrations may, I hope, be capable of being reversed.
Well said, Ben. Let's just remind ourselves just how ridiculous this race to number 10 Downing Street has become. This is Rishi Sunak, you know, who has now reached, he's now behaving like some sort of pop star or something and making jokes at the expense of himself. Let's have a listen.
Good evening. So, funny enough, actually, my parents are staying with us at the moment, and I realised I'd been campaigning a lot when last night I was talking to them, and I started telling them that my dad was a GP and my mum ran the local chemist where I grew up.
Well, why not? He's told everyone else. I mean, he's now making jokes about the haplessness of his own campaign. What is going on here, Ben? Behaving like some kind of superannuated member of first, what are they called? Direction or whatever they're called. You know, like some sort of pop star. Yeah. What are they called? One Direction. Yeah, that's it. Anyway, ridiculous.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is Rishi, isn't it? People have cited Rishi's wealth as a reason for him not to be Prime Minister. I don't think that's an issue. The bigger issue for me is Rishi seems disconnected from, like his predecessor, Johnson. Johnson was much better at masking it, but Rishi is entirely disconnected from the electorate. He doesn't really have a feeling for it. He sees himself as having a monopoly on moral correctitude, intelligentsia, the way the nation should be run. The reason he doesn't want to cut taxes is because he thinks he can manage our money better than we can. The reason he wants to have this big state intervention on the cost of living crisis is because he thinks he can manage that better than we can. The reason he wants to raise corporation tax and then give companies all sorts of special breaks if they do this, that, and the other, is because he thinks he can micromanage the way private enterprises go about their business. Rishi thinks he knows it all. And to be fair to Rishi, he had a privileged upbringing, nothing like the one that he sought to convey in his campaign video. Rishi had a really privileged upbringing, incredibly well educated. He went to Winchester College, first-class school. He went to Oxford University, top university, not as good as Cambridge, I will add, but at first-class university. Then he went to Stanford. And he married a billionaireess. He worked at Goldman Sachs. There's a lot Rishi knows, but none of it is connected with the electorate. And I'm afraid that opening pitch that he made, walking on like some kind of pop star, was really him celebrating his own privileged position. And he needs to have a reality check.
He really does. He's not from a privileged background. I mean, or he's from a privileged background. He acts like his parents were coal miners, and and he worked down the pit as well. It's unbelievable. Yeah. He went to one of the most expensive private schools in the country. So don't buy that nonsense. Only got a minute or so left, Ben. But harking back to what you just alluded to, I don't think either of these candidates really are quite across just how bad this economic abyss is that we're staring into. This cost of living crisis could be the worst in modern history, and both of them seem to say, oh, we're giving you 400 quid, what more do you want?
Yeah, I don't think they've understood it. And of course, it's much deeper than the cost of living crisis. As they move to address the problems in this cost of living crisis, they will create other problems. I mean, the fact is that we've got a global economy which is out of kilter, very out of kilter. And it's out of kilter because all the developed countries effectively shut down their economies for 2 years, creating, we talk about butterfly wings. What we did was take a massive boulder and chuck it into an otherwise very stable ecosystem that is very sensitive. And, we absolutely blew it apart with lockdowns. And when they move now, as they probably will in order to garner support by printing more money to support people through the cost of living crisis, they will create even more problems for, to have to deal with down the road. Yeah. What we need to do is have this reality check. I mean, Liz Truss is saying the right things. I do believe if she delivers, if she actually does what she says she's going to do, I think there is a way back. It's going to be painful. Yeah. I mean, Rishi's right.
Well, it will be painful. It will be painful because there's all these handouts that everybody's demanding and the government's promising, or these two candidates are promising. Trouble is, we have to pay for them down the line. Why are we partly in such a mess economically right now? Because we're paying for the furlough schemes. It's as simple as that. We're trapped in a kind of economic Ponzi government. We really are. Ben, I'm going to have to call it a day there, but fantastic to talk to you as always. That's Ben Habib, chairman of Brexit Watch and a former MEP.